Well, thank you, Mike, and welcome everybody to Dallas, Texas, one of my favorite places to come. I'm a Cowboys fan, and I love coming here. And I was glad to be asked to come here and share my story. Every last one of us out there has a story, you know. And 8 years ago, when I met that young man, Mr. Riches, I was in the back of a room just like this, and I thought to myself, you know, I hope one day they get me to get up there and tell my story. And because my story, it touches my heart every time I tell it. So you people in the front row, you might want to get a slicker suit. I tend to get a little teary-eyed sometimes when I say this, but it's my life. It's turned out to become my passion, and it's what drives me every day. I have two words that I live by, and that's I believe. I truly do. I wake up every morning. When I look in the mirror, I say those two words, I believe. And it's gotten me through my life. And the things I believe in are, number one, my Lord and Savior. Through him, everything is possible. The second thing is my family. They are what drive me. They are my why. You know, I didn't have to have a big house. I didn't have to have a yacht or anything else to drive me. I had a family that loved me, and that was all I needed. And my third thing is my passion for the services we offer people. See, I've never looked at myself as a salesman in this. I've never been a salesman. I mean, look at me. I'm not your atypical sales-looking kind of guy. But I do know this. In life, things do hit us. Bad things do happen to good people every day. And my life has been a story of that. Because when I was 11 years old, I wasn't a bad person. I was a good kid. But a lot of bad things were happening in my life. I was the son of a doctor, one of the most prominent doctors in Saginaw, Michigan. My mother was an ex-beauty queen. They met, got married, and started having children. I was the youngest of four. And the problem with my dad was he came from poverty. He worked his way out of a ghetto and got himself an education, went through the military, became a boxing champ in the military, middleweight champ, put himself through college, forced his brothers to go to college, and then all of a sudden something happened to him. He started making money, and he never really understood money before, never really had any money. And my dad had a lot of demons with him, and at age 11, those demons started really coming out when I was a small boy. One of the scariest times in my life was the evening news back then. Back then, as Chet Huntley and David Brinkley were signing off at 6 o'clock, if my dad's car wasn't rolling in that driveway, we knew it was going to be trouble that night because that meant he was out drinking. My dad would roll in 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and completely drunk, barely even able to stand, but yet he always seemed to have enough energy to abuse my mother and us kids. The sad thing about it is, folks, back then we didn't have legal shield. We didn't have a way my mother could defend herself because she was married to prominent Dr. Feheeley, you know, and who was going to question him? I remember my oldest sister called the police one night when my dad had literally almost killed my mom, tore the house completely apart. When the policeman got there, my sister was standing at the top of the stairs, and she was saying, "Take that son of a gun away. Get him out of here. Get him out of here." And I remember vividly that policeman looking back up and said, "Miss Feheeley, Dr. Feheeley delivered both my children. I'm not taking that man to jail. Now, I've spoken with him, and he's going to be just fine." Yeah, right. After they left, he was just fine, all right. But that went on for about 2 years. I woke up one day, and my mother was literally almost beaten to death. She had 2 cracked ribs, a broke arm. She was unconscious. Her jaw was broken. The house was torn completely apart. My older sister had been beaten that night as well. And so my aunt, my mother's younger sister, got my mother and made her move out of state. My older siblings left, and here I was at age 11 stuck with my alcoholic father. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what I could do. The next couple of years, I used to drive him around while he'd do his drinking. I'd take him to bars, and I'd get him home at night, and I'd do all kinds of things. The abuse never stopped. And then finally he met somebody. It was a girl that just moved over here from Bolivia. She was working as an assistant candy striper at the hospital. And my dad informed me on my 12th, fixing to be 13th birthday, that I needed to find a place to live, that I was no longer welcome, and he was starting a new life. So at age 13, here I was on my own. I didn't know what I was going to do. I really didn't have any place to go. I kind of bummed off friends for a while, kind of got involved with a crowd I shouldn't have been involved with, ended up getting on drugs. And by about the middle of my 13th year, I was a heroin addict. The next 4 years was a battle. Every day fighting that monkey on my back, every day hunting money to support my habit. And when I was 17, I woke up in a park. I had been passed out on the bench there, and that's where a lot of us got our drugs, was at that park. And I was laying there on that bench, and when I woke up, I saw a man out there, and he was playing football with his two sons. And his two sons were about 18, 19 years old. And one of them had on a University of Michigan sweatshirt, and the other one had on a Michigan State sweatshirt. And I sat there, and I saw the happiness in that family, and I saw the proud father that was looking there at his two sons, and I just broke down, and I started crying, which I may do right here. Because I thought to myself, that should be me and my brother. You know, why is it I couldn't have had that life? And I dropped to my knees right then and there, and I asked the good Lord that if he would get me out of that situation, that I would find a woman and I would have a family, and they would never know what it was like not to have a father. And about 4 days later, I checked into a rehabilitation program. I spent a year and a half in there. I ended up moving down to Louisiana. They asked me to come to New Orleans. I came to New Orleans. I was fixing to go back to Detroit, Michigan, when they asked me to stop off in Shreveport. I'd never heard of Shreveport. Didn't even really know what it was. Got to Shreveport. The day I got off of the bus there in Shreveport, it was 85 degrees. I was 19 years old, and I just saw two of the prettiest girls I'd ever seen in my whole life. And I thought, you know, Shreveport's not bad. I just may stay here. I ended up doing just that. I stayed in Shreveport. I met the love of my life. I was introduced to my wife by her aunt. We were working together. And the night I met my wife, 20 minutes after I met her, I asked her to marry me. She thought I was crazy. I probably was back then. But I knew, I took one look in her eyes, and I knew I had met the woman that I wanted to raise my children. I knew I had met the woman that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And here we are 32 years later. We're still together. We're still happy. And now we're celebrating grandchildren. We just had our 5th one. So like I said, the Lord is great. But my story doesn't stop there. You know, here I was. I'm uneducated. I didn't finish high school. I had to drop out and go to work. I didn't have any real training in anything except how to hustle drugs. And here I was now all of a sudden having to support a wife and a family. Well, times were tough. We were getting by as best we could. I worked a lot of different jobs, worked a lot of labor jobs in my life, a lot of construction. Worked 2 jobs most of the time to feed my family. And about 8 years ago, my wife, as our kids got a little bit older, she went back to work, so that helped out some. And a little over 8 years ago, times were getting tough on us again. My wife, the company she had worked for years, had shut down and filed bankruptcy. The company I was working for, where I was driving a forklift at, had cut all our overtime out and cut our hours back. My oldest son was in the war. He was one of the first ones sent to Iraq. My middle son was in his first year of college. He was the first one of any of us to go to college. And my youngest son was about to get out of high school. And here I was, almost 50 years old, and I was broke again. Things were spinning out of hand. My middle son offered to quit college and get a job to help support the family. I couldn't take his dream away from him, and I said no. As a man, I wasn't feeling too good about myself, because here my oldest son that was fighting for our country might not even have a home to come back to unless a miracle happened. A young man showed up where I was working at, and we were gathered in a room, and he started talking about this plan. And as he started to talk about Legal Shield, they didn't even offer the identity theft protection back then. Of course, I wouldn't even know what identity theft was back then. But as he talked about this legal plan, something went off in my head. As broke as I was, I said to myself, you know, if I can just call and get some right answers on some of these things, that would be a blessing to me and my family. That would be a lot of help. So I took it out that day. I really didn't know what I had taken out. I wasn't really clear. Went home, kind of mentioned it to my wife. She just kind of looked at me like, we can't even buy groceries this week, and you're taking this plan out? And 4 days after I took this plan out, I got slapped with a foreclosure on my home. Well, that was about the straw that broke the camel's back right there. I didn't know what to do. Now I was losing my home. My house was printed in the Bienville Democrat, which is our local newspaper, for a sheriff's sale in 3 weeks. The mortgage company had ceased talking to me, and no matter how many times I'd try to call them, I was just pushed aside. Their thing is, we'll just take his home, resell it, get him out. And I remembered I had taken this legal plan out, and I called up Mike Riches because I had gotten a card from him. And I said, Mr. Riches, can I use this legal plan for a foreclosure? He said, Mr. Feheeley, you can use that legal plan for anything that hits you. Trust me, people are there to help. Call them. And I thought, what do I have to lose? I called the toll-free number. An attorney got right on the phone with me. I was pretty impressed with this attorney. His name was Trent McCarthy. And when he got on the phone, he almost sounded like he was from Harvard. You know himself. He kind of had a little nasally talk about him. He said, yes, Mr. Feheeley, this is Trent McCarthy. How can I help you? And I was like, hey. I started discussing my problems with him. And about halfway through my conversation, he just stopped me. He said, Mr. Feheeley, I've heard all I need to hear. I need you to do 2 things for me right away. And I said, what's that? He said, first, I need you to gather all that documentation between you and your mortgage company and overnight it to me. I said, okay, I can do that. He said, the second thing I want you to do is go home and tell your wife everything's going to be okay because help is here. And I told him, I said, dude, I'm going to send you that stuff, but I ain't telling that crazy Indian I'm married to a thing unless I know it to be a fact. You know, my wife and I were under a great deal of pressure. I don't know if any of y'all have ever had a child in a war, but when you do, it's all you can think about. It's all you concern yourself with. You know, it consumed her life. She wasn't sleeping as it was, and now we're losing our home on top of that. It was more than that woman could bear. And I wasn't about to say, hey, you know that thing I took out the other day? Cheap little thing? It's going to save our home. I was not about to put her through that. So I sent him that information. Over the next 10 days, Mr. McCarthy called me several times. And he kept updating me on what he was doing. He said, Mr. Feheeley, I just want to let you know I just sent a fax off to the attorneys that represent your mortgage company, and in this fax was blah, 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 blah. Then he called me a few days later. He said, I just received a fax back from them. I'm going to refax them back this. And I kept thinking, well, it sounds like he's working on it. You know, it sounds like he's trying. But you got to realize that clock was ticking. That 3 weeks was running out. My wife had already started getting big boxes and started boxing up stuff in our house. And all of a sudden on that 10th day, I got a call out of Baton Rouge from Wells Fargo's attorneys. And the first thing that attorney said to me has always stuck in my mind. And that is, Mr. Feheeley, I have to compliment you on your choice of law firms. And I said, oh, really? He said, yes, Prevost, Sadler, and Deloney is one of the finest firms in our state. I know Trent McCarthy personally, and we've negotiated this out. We're going to let you keep your home, and this is what I need you to do. And he had about 3 or 4 things he needed me to do. Folks, up till that point, I didn't know the name of that law firm. I had no idea who I'd been calling. I was just calling a toll-free number that was on the back of a membership card. But I tell you what, I got to know that law firm real good after that, because everything happened just the way he said it would happen. A few days later, I received some papers. A few days later, I was down in Baton Rouge, and right after that, my house was reinstated to me. The sheriff's sale went away, the mean calls, the letters, everything. And then I turned around and I thought, whoa, I bet I owe these attorneys like $3,000 or $4,000. Now, how am I going to pay these guys? So I called Trent McCarthy at the Provider Law Firm, and I said, Mr. McCarthy, I said, I really want to thank you for what you've done. I mean, this is truly the greatest blessing of all right now. And I said, but sir, I need to know, what do I owe y'all? He said, Mr. Feheeley, you don't owe us a thing. That's part of your membership. I said, what? I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, I hung up real quick because I thought he had made a mistake. I really did. And I called Mike Riches back up, and I said, look, I've never sold anything. I've never done anything like this before in my life. But I have got to get involved with this company, because I know there's millions of people just like Brian running around here that are struggling every day and don't know where the answers are. You know, I was always kind of the guy that would go to the older guy at work. Didn't matter that he couldn't spell his own name hardly. I'd go to him for legal advice and advice on marriage and everything, because he was supposed to know. He had gray hair, you know. Those kind of attorneys do nothing but get you in trouble. Sort of like those kind of doctors. You know, my kid's got this thing on the back. You know, oh, don't worry about it. Just rub some Bengay on it. They'll be fine. You know, you don't want to take that kind of advice. What I learned very quickly is you can come up out of a dark, deep hole if you'll use this membership. My wife and I got to where we called them on advice on everything. If we felt like we were being mistreated on anything, we had the attorneys on the phone with us. She would ask them advice about our insurance company, our cell phone company, Dish Network. They've all heard from our attorneys at one point or another. The only thing I truly wish is that 40-some years ago, 50-some years ago, they'd had this plan for my mother. Because, folks, there's millions of people out there that need our help. You know, I live in a very small market. Total population in my town is 850 people. And yet I'm one of the top producers with Harvard. I've been an executive director for over 3 years. I get the top pay. And why is that? You can make this thing work if you believe. I believe in my family. I believe in my Lord and Savior. I believe in this membership. And I believe in Harvard. I believe Harvard gives us the right tools, gives us the right training, gives us access to things most people don't have in most business. You know, I talk to a lot of people that I meet in this business that are coming on board with us that have worked for multi-million-dollar corporations, and they say, man, y'all's training is the best out there. But folks, you want to be successful in this business, you got to have belief. You hear the belief in Mark Riches, you know, living in an apartment, 5 kids. Goes one day and sees this guy do it and says, hey, if he can do it, I can do it. That's what I said. 8 years ago when he took me to my first meeting and I was sitting in the back, I said, I want to be the guy that they asked to come up front. You know what it signifies when you get to come up here every time and they ask you, and they offer to put you up in a room if you'll come? It means you made it. You understand what it takes. And all it takes is a belief. The tools are there. The system's in place. If you haven't used your membership, shame on you. Shame on you. It's why you're not selling memberships. But if you're using it, you're going to market it. And folks, like I said, we all have our stories. I appreciate you letting me come up here and share my story. And best of luck. If there's anything I can do, let me know. Thank you.